And we're live. So let's see how the... And that's working. Okay. So thanks or cheers to Roy for showing us how to make eyes in GIMP. And although I think he was using the latest version, I don't think you actually need to use the latest version. So whatever version of GIMP you've got, hello Snoop, I've no idea how you pronounce that name. Spoops. So yeah, even though he was using the latest version of GIMP, I don't think you actually need to specifically use that version. You can make the eyes using the principles that he was using to make them in not just GIMP but any version. Hi DJ. But it was good to see. There is a video by is it on it should be in the archives of this channel, but there's a tutorial video with, was it Miss Maya? She made eyes or an eye texture. So after Roy's has been archived on Twitch or YouTube, wherever it's going to be put, watch both of them and you'll see the difference, the different techniques that both of them use to get similar outcomes in terms of the quality of the eye textures that they produce. But it's interesting to watch another creator using what looks like completely different techniques to get the same results. And I would show them on screen, but it'll probably crash the stream, so won't be doing that. So you'll have to take a look at that in your own time. Spoop, yeah, I've no idea how you put it. Poop, spoops, spoop. Okay, spoop. I'll take your word for that in terms of how you pronounce your name. So what we're going to be doing is, as you may have read on IMVU, they have been working very hard updating the Creator Center with all the creator tutorials, because those of the old school will know that the Creator Center was quite confusing. A for effort. Oh, right, in pronouncing the name. Yes. Thank you, teacher. I shall print that out and put it on the wall as a certificate. So the old Creator Center, which we no longer have access to, unfortunately, was quite confusing. So what they've done, what IMVU have done, is they've reorganized everything. And this is the new Creator Center if you've not seen it before. You don't necessarily need to be logged in to actually see this. So if you type, to get to it directly, type create.imvu.com and it'll go straight to the Creator Center. You can't get to it otherwise. There are no links on the home page, so if you are completely new to IMVU or IMVU, if you're completely new, you can't access it directly. So if you don't know, well, if you haven't created an account but you want to look at the creator stuff, create.imvu.com, and that'll open the Creator Center. So what IMVU have actually been doing is rejigging, reorganizing a lot of the older creator tutorials and reorganizing them into categories. And because they want to get as many people involved as possible, we've now got a separate section for Blender, which we'll look at in a second. So we've got all the quick start stuff, which is hopefully going to be a list of tutorials that will get you started on certain products. So that might just be deriving the t-shirt or making a simple accessory. Usually you will, I don't know the extent to which they will be, I think they're all going to be targeted at beginners, so that should be good. So if we have a look at Quick Start, so we've now got a list, everything's listed. But if you're looking for something specific, there's also now the search feature, which is a lot better than the other one. And just type whatever you want in there. So let's do accessories. And it'll give a little pop-up, which you can scroll down or just show all results. And it'll show all the results for that particular search word. So let's go back. So we've got Quick Start, Creator Tool. This will be the Creator Tool itself. So these are all the tutorials about the let me just open that. Hello, Sky. Sky Ethereal. Don't be shy, DJ. Oh, and if you have any questions about the Education Centre and the tutorials, just ask away and we'll try and fumble our way through them. Because obviously, although I am writing up the stuff for Blender, I will do my best to answer your questions generally about the Creator Centre. So let's just drive a... Won't be doing this, but... incidental music whilst this loads. Right, so hopefully what IMVU is doing is now breaking the tutorials down into much more, into clearer categories. So all the ones that we were just looking at, or the list of tutorials, these are to do with the Create tool itself, which is the editor essentially, and Create mode. So all of this stuff, which is handy, makes it easier to understand. Oh yes, the glasses, those are the default accessory that they've been in place since the very beginning, I think, designed by one of the founders of IMVU, I think, a guy called Matt, I think. But those are 2004, so that's what, 12, 13, 14 years old. Those are the originals. But these are all the base product items. So that's the Create tool. What else have they got in here? New. So that's going to be tutorials that are new or highlighted. So again, we've got a couple of Blender ones in there for now. Avatar DNA, what's that one? That's to do with the avatar. I've not had a look through a lot of these myself because I've just been busy with the Blender stuff, but so clothing. Most of these will be 3D Studio Max at the moment. Rooms and furniture. texturing. What you may also see is that a couple of the tutorials will turn up in different categories. So the easy t-shirt is also in the quick starts. Well, hopefully, Abandoned, that's what the new Creator Center will help you with. So hopefully you will be able to go to the quick start section straight away and work through any number of tutorials that are listed here to get you started. The first one we generally recommend is just the Easy T, because that just gets you used to the overall process of deriving a product, swapping out the texture, and then submitting that to the catalog. And that's all you need to get started, just the basics, and then you can work your way through all the other stuff. And some of the stuff does obviously get quite complicated. Thanks for popping in, Sky Ethereal. So we've got texturing, meshes, animating, Blender, 3D Studio Max, importing, best practices. So that's the, you want to, although these aren't necessarily tutorials in terms of how you make stuff, you'll want to read through these. And where's the one about textures? Texture scale. This one in particular. Because as you heard, if you were watching Roy's stream, you will have heard him mention what did he say? Don't make your textures larger than 512 by 512. So if you, IMVU is restricted to 512 in one direction. So if you make a 512 by 512, it squashes it to 256 by 256. So if you're going to make a 512, you'll need to make sure that it's essentially a brick, the shape of a brick. So one of those bricks. That's going to be the size of your image, because it'll resize anything larger than that. So read through this. That's an important one for your creating. Another one is marketing tips. That's another one to read through. A lot of people ask about this. And I think, again, we've done a couple of streams with people talking about some of their marketing, what they do for marketing. If it's not in the tutorial, it'll be in the discussions where the question is asked quite frequently. No, Liana, it's always been, if you make a 512 by 512 texture, which is square, it will resize it to 256 by 256, because what it's doing is keeping the ratio, the 1-to-1 height width. It's keeping that, and the only way it can do that is to resize the texture overall. So if you do a 512 by 512 and it gets resized, you're losing, what is it, 3/4? It reduces it 3/4. So you're losing quite a lot of data. So if you are designing something that you want to use a 512, you're going to have to do one of two things: either break the object, the project into sections, so Laura thinks she can have a bit of fun and text separately via a chat and thinks that she can distract us whilst we're doing Twitch. But what she doesn't know is that I will talk about her doing that, even though she's not in voice chat, which is what would normally happen. So, back at you, Laura. Or Jinx. Yeah, so it doesn't change anything. So DJ, no, you can use 512 by 256, and that will keep the size and the shape of the texture. What you don't want to be doing is using a 512 by 512. But if you're making meshes or other products, or what you can do is derive from products where people have compensated and they've broken their let's say a pair of trousers, for example. Normally what you would do is front and back on the same texture. So if you had your 512 by 256, you can imagine the front on one side and the back on the other. What people do now is they use two textures, both of them 512 by 256, and they will have the front on one texture and the back on another texture. So you'll have two textures, and because obviously they're full size, they will be higher resolution, higher quality. Obviously the downside to that is you are doubling up or quadrupling up, however many textures are used, the amount of data that's being transferred when people use your products. So that's something to be mindful of, but that's how people get around it. All right, so what else have we got? Importing. Now the importing is going to be interesting because we now have FBX. At the moment it only is FBX. Where's the Cal 3D stuff? So let's use the search feature. Cal 3D. So we've got animating in Blender, FBX import. Introduction. Let's have a quick look at that. Yes, 512. Yeah, that's very much eyes watering. 512 by 512. Roy is saying that 512 by 512 on meshes makes me cry. So having a look through here, this is a breakdown. Oh, that's interesting. So this is worth noting that the switch to FBX doesn't mean that you that they're neglecting or getting rid of Cal 3D. You can use either or, but in either case, Cal 3D and FBX are containers for the various XML files. So we've got skeleton, mesh, materials, although those are no longer needed, animation, and morphs. So when you import your FBX or your Cal file, well, the Cal 3D file produces these, but the FBX is essentially a container for all of these, and it converts it on import. But you can still use Cal 3D even though there is a bit of a push towards FBX, which is much more user-friendly and supported by more applications. So we've got texturing, meshing, animating, Blender, 3D Studio Max, importing, best practices. So make sure you read through all of those. The best practices ones, that is. Advanced skills and brand building, that's another one you want to have a look at. This gets asked a lot. How do creators market themselves, sell their products? There are, as I mentioned, some discussion in the discussions, or forums, as we would normally call that. Blame Shannon Mack for that. Read through these and it'll give you some ideas about what you can do to promote your products. And these aren't a, what would you say? What did you get lost with, DJ? So there's a delay obviously between live and chat response. Read through these for your marketing, promotion, and all that lovely stuff. It's not a guarantee, but it'll help you. So have a read through those. Oh, FBX importing is pretty straightforward now, actually. FBX is much, it's easier to use than Cal3D. But if you're used to Cal3D, making the switch to FBX might be confusing, but it is pretty straightforward. But it means, excuse me, it means that it's potentially possible to use any 3D application that supports FBX. If you can export an FBX file from your application of choice, you should, in theory, be able to get that into IMVU. It may take a bit of tweaking and fiddling, but you should be able to get there. So all the old 3DS tutorials, the Max tutorials, are all now in their own category. And hopefully they will have their Blender equivalent. So this is essentially what we've been working on, is updating or converting, or translating, I should say, translating the Max tutorials into Blender. So there's a lot of these, and there's still more to come. But if you are familiar with Max but want to switch because you might have been using an older version, or you might have been using the demo, which lasts, is it 30 days? I think it's 30 days. You should be able to look at the 3D Studio Max version. And although we haven't done it in these tutorials, which might be an interesting thing that we could do, there is a direct, let me just open this in another browser window. So what was that one? Skeleton hierarchy. So there is a Blender corollary to that. Just got to remember what it was titled. So avatar skeleton hierarchy. I think that's that one. Let me look for the, yeah, it is, it's this one. I think I'll have to suggest that to Laura. So what we can do is, if you are familiar with 3D Studio Max, the way that we've written the Blender tutorials in particular, it might be the same for others. Lost IMVU. I've definitely been interested in learning Blender Never Mesh before, but it's fascinating. Is Blender a good starter for learning meshing with? Well, it's not so much whether it's a good starter, it's whether you want to, because as Roy mentioned, Blender is free, 3D Studio Max isn't, and if you do download the demo of that, it's only for 30 days, so you might as well just get stuck in with Blender. And that's what we're trying to encourage with the tutorials. So, I mean, it's unlikely that if you already have a legitimate version of 3D Studio Max that you're going to switch, unless you're using a very old version. But the way that we've organized the tutorials, excuse me, frog in the throat. The way that we've organized the tutorials is that the original 3D Studio Max tutorials have a direct correlation with Blender. So if you're familiar with the way that avatar skeletons are set up, for example, you can go to the version or the one that's about Blender and read exactly the same. Well, it's actually a bit more information, but you can read exactly the same information about Blender and potentially make the switch from one to the other. I'll have to suggest that to Jinxie, that we put what's missing, or what we could do is a link from the Max versions to the Blender versions, so that there is you can go back and forth. Well, abandoned free is not necessarily always better. It's when you talk about better, best, what you're actually talking about is whether it fits the way that you think and the way that you function and work. So a lot of people get on very well with Blender because it fits the way they think or the way that they work, whereas others get on with Max because that suits their way of thinking. And it's not a discussion so much, well, these days anyway. I mean, you might have had that discussion earlier on in Blender's development, but these days it's just about how well the application fits the way that you think and the way that you work. So let's continue having a look at the Blender stuff. So what we've been doing so far, I did make some notes about this, but I can't remember where I've put them. We've broken all the tutorials down loosely into categories. So all the stuff to do with all the tutorials that'll get you started relatively quickly, they're being done first, and then we'll work our way through upwards to the more complicated stuff like morphs, animation. There are a couple of other things as well. And we've done our best to provide you with as many pictures as possible, because that's another thing that was kind of missing from the old tutorials. So lots of pictures that'll explain everything to you. We've also used these highlights, which highlight important things that you need to know of, but aren't necessarily part of the main paragraph text of the tutorial. So it's not necessarily something that you would be learning by reading paragraph text, but it is something you need to be aware of whilst you're doing something. So lots of pictures and some embedded movies as well. There are some YouTube movies or overviews of some of the tutorials which are yet to be uploaded or included in the tutorials, but those will be there as well. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. Yes, oh, that's another thing as well. Thank you for reminding me, Liana. We are also working on a lot of example files for you with the Blender stuff. So let's go back to Blender. So we've got the avatar files. So you can download Blender, but we've also got there we go, it's downloading those. And it's scanning those. How do you, Panda's asking, how do you refix if you make a mistake? Make a mistake where? So, we're providing a lot of example files. So these are the standard, I won't open these at the moment. These are the standard files for avatars. So we've got accessories, clothing, poses, shape keys. There isn't a male accessories because you can use the female. But these are the avatar files that we've got available at the moment. But we are also going to be providing example files for furniture. So hopefully everything that you see in whatever tutorial you are reading, so in this instance it's a furniture item and there's a simple stool, that stool will be provided as an example file in the Blender, Blender's format, so that's .blend, for you to do whatever, whatever you want with them. That's the furniture starter file. So this table will also be available. Just click on that, see if this will work. What's that for? I can't remember what some of these are for. Oh, I think that's append. Or you'll be using that quite a bit, appending stuff. Abandoned, you mean undoing something when you've made a mistake in Blender or in IMVU? Yep, totally agree with that, Roy. Append is great. Oh, that's what that was. Yeah, so what we did in that, or what that was showing the process of, was appending the furniture starter file dummies, the avatar dummies with the seating, into the, or was it vice versa? One way or the other. But appending, which means importing one file's contents into another. So that table will be available for you. What else have we got? Table, materials. What's that one? Oh, that's the one we were just looking at. Room nodes, skeleton. This room will be available, so we'll be making that available. And what we'll also be doing is you might find that there are several versions of the same file. So you'll have a version of this with just the standard dummies or the seating. So the standing dummies and the sitting dummy. They'll be sitting on things. But there'll also be another version where we actually start using custom poses. So we can use the same spots. Can't click on these to make these bigger. We'll be using the same spots, but we'll be creating custom poses for them. So the 2 different versions or the 3 different versions or however many versions there are, they'll be available as well. So you can do whatever you want with those. So there'll be, whoops. Well, abandoned, if you are undoing in Blender, that's going to be different with undoing in IMVU, because I don't think you can undo something in the same way as doing normally. You would just do Control Z or Control Z, and that would undo whatever it was that you were doing in Blender or 3D Studio Max or whatever app you're using, but I don't think we have that in IMVU. You essentially have to derive the product again and restart it. So yes, that's that. We don't have a undo in IMVU. I don't think it's something that they would put in either. So what else have we got? Animated nodes. Oh, and that's something that's interesting. Oh, so yes, this roundabout, or whatever they're called in the US, that'll be available. And again, in different versions. So you'll have a version with just the standard poses, and then you'll have one with custom poses, so that you can compare the two and see how it all fits together. But having the actual files on hand makes that easier for you. So again, lots of pictures. And this is just for creating a simple animation in IMVU. Simple animated furniture item, I should say. So you'll get this as an example file. It's having trouble playing back because we're streaming at the same time. In fact, might as well show you whilst we've got you here. Yes, winter reading. So there's a lot. There's going to be quite a lot of tutorials. So let me just open the file that we were just looking at. Furniture. There is quite a lot of it. Oh, here we go. So, what you'll get is this example file, and you can just use it in conjunction with the tutorials just to see how everything fits together. But I mean, for instance, have I got an earlier version? Let me see if we've got an earlier version. Yes, this one doesn't animate. So this is an earlier version. But what you'll see is the standard position. Where have the dummies gone? So you'll be able to see how you can use the different elements of the example files to do certain things. For example, in one of the tutorials, it's not discussed in this one. So let's just do a quick, so furniture, capture and picture. So one of the things that you'll see working through the tutorials is that if you use everything as is, you'll be able to produce something that's workable. But we're also including things to do with, they're not advanced as such, but you can adjust and move things and manipulate them to compensate for certain things not happening or things that you don't want to happen. So the standard seating, and the node won't select now. Where's the node gone? There it is. So the standard seating has all the seat nodes aligned. And what you'll find is with the example files, so let's open the other one that we were just looking at, you'll see that they're all moved off to one side, and you'll also note that they don't spin. So what we're doing is providing example files that show all of these little tricks. So that's one version, that's two versions. So the third version will be using the same file but creating poses. So you'll have another version that you can check different simple poses. These items will they'll also be uploaded as products. Thanks for stopping by, Lost IMVU. Yes, it will be archived. It'll either be archived on Twitch or it'll be also uploaded to YouTube. So platform of preference, it'll be available. So yes, you'll be able to watch it later. So we're going to be providing different versions of the same files so that you have something to work with as you are reading through and working through the tutorials. But what's yet to come is the more complicated stuff, which is the animated products. So at the moment, it's just basically breaking down a lot of the basics. So we've got the avatar files explained, stuff to do with the structure of products, so that's your skeletons. If you're making furniture and rooms, we're talking about nodes now rather than skeletons or armatures. So we'll be going over that. Did we do one? There is one in here that just briefly mentions the difference between making rooms and furniture with skeletons versus, with armatures versus nodes. For example, accessories. You need to use an armature for accessories, whereas you can use nodes for furniture. And they both function and work the same way. Yeah, IMVU. IMVU seems sick. Yeah, it's still going. And as Roy just said, yes, this is the after show where we're just going through the Creator Education Centre and how it's been reorganised. I was going to say rebuilt. We have the technology to rebuild it. $6 million man, woman, or person. You'll be able to watch this afterwards. I mean, we're coming up to an hour almost already, which is, time flies quick. But you'll be able to watch this afterwards once we're done. We were just basically going over the Education Centre and the tutorials that are being written for you. But yes, so there are going to be some example files, but a lot of them aren't yet available because they're still being worked on. Or carrot, yes, yes, Roy, carrot. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it in terms of just going through quickly within an hour what's going on, and there's still more to come. So if you have any questions about what we've just been looking at, just ask away. I'm not sure. Yeah, so we're providing downloads to some of the files within the tutorials, but I'm not sure if there is going to be a global download link for all the example files, and they will include textures which will be TGA format, which, as long as you've got GIMP, Photoshop, PhotoPaint, or any of the main photo image editing apps, they should handle those. Yeah, so hopefully we should have the videos all linked up and the downloads all linked up once all the tutorials are done. Just make a note of that. And that's pretty much it, really. So the only thing missing so far is a lot of the animation and more complicated products that you would be using Blender for. So that's animated poses. This is essentially a static pose. It uses the same principles, but it's a bit more involved to create an animated pose. So those are to come. Or if you're watching this after the fact, a couple of months down the line, they should be available. But you'll be getting all of these files. Yes, there is, DJ. There is a lot to absorb, and a lot of it depends on the type of products that you are wanting to make, because you don't necessarily need to be using Blender, obviously, for all the product types that you want, and some of them are easier to do than others. So what were we just looking at? Oh, that's a quick start furniture. Yes, you see, so a simple furniture item let me just I'll go back to where did it go? Furniture skeleton. Oh, here we go. Here's the so if you're using Blender, the FBX allows you to use these things called nodes. Previously, we had to use a skeleton, which is an actual thing in its own right. FBX makes it much more straightforward to make a product, particularly furniture and rooms. So your furniture essentially can be made from, they don't have to be this complicated where all these different colors denote different elements of your skeleton, but they don't have to be that complicated. In fact, you could export this cube with this single node that you might just be able to make out on the stream. I don't know how clear that is, but there's a wireframe box there. That is a furniture item. There's no seating on it, but you don't have to make things particularly complicated. So FBX now makes this much easier to do, to make furniture. You can make accessories and other things, but you still have to use bones for those, which might be more complicated relative to just doing something as simple as furniture item. But obviously the more interactive you want your products to be, the more complicated things get. Yes, Roy. Roy was just saying, I was wondering, I'm used to skeletons, not used to furniture. So yes, if you are coming to Blender old school, products have to be made with these pointy things, armatures and bones. FBX now means that we don't have to, well, anything that's not avatar related, you can use these little nodes, these things. We don't have to use bones and skeletons anymore for certain products, which makes it easy to make them. Avatars you still do. Yes, that's true, Roy. Roy's just saying he gets confused with, he made animated wings but got lost with furniture. So yes, it depends on what it is that you're doing. But we're going to be, all of this will be explained in the tutorial. So the difference between, or the basic difference between using bones versus nodes. Nodes is just an easy tool to use to produce products because they are independent. With a skeleton, you have to have a skeleton as an object. This is a thing in its own right. And then you have things, which is the bones, inside the skeleton. FBX allows us now to use all sorts of different types of objects to create a skeleton, which is essentially just a hierarchy. So it's this. That's all it is. It's just a hierarchy. So FBX allows us to create hierarchies without needing a skeleton, an actual hierarchy or hierarchical object. But that's useful for, well, we can't, you have to use skeletons for avatar related stuff, but for furniture and rooms we can use these nodes. Well, hopefully, DJ, these tutorials will help not do that to you, and you will be able to get to grips with Blender for your product creating. It's recommended as well that you start with something simple, so simple furniture. Start with furniture, get the basics of skeletons. So you don't have to make complicated furniture items or complicated products. For furniture in particular, this is just a mesh, doesn't matter what that is, with a node. And the two of them together create a hierarchy which can be exported. And it's as simple as that. So in terms of getting your products from Blender to IMVU, so long as you have this basic structure in place, you can produce a product. So that bit, getting your stuff from Blender to IMVU, isn't the tricky part so much as it's this stuff, learning how to use Blender, learning how to create, well, this isn't specifically complicated, obviously, depending on your point of view, but making these meshes is what's going to take your time now. Instead of having to worry about getting the skeleton set up properly, all you need to do now is focus on getting your mesh set up properly, and then you can just use these nodes and job's done. And it's relatively straightforward to create products now because of FBX. And it's the same for there we go, rooms. So this is the basement that you'll get a copy of. But this looks complicated because there's a lot of stuff on screen. But if you break it down, you've got the core elements of a room, and that's just basically 4 nodes. That's it. I mean, you could literally export a room with these 4 nodes. IMVU will do its best to fill in some of the other bits that are missing, like the seating. Then you've got your furniture nodes, and there's usually a lot of these, but again, it's just a simple cube. That's all it is. Then, of course, you've got your mesh. Oh, that's another mesh. And then the seating nodes. And obviously, all together, and that's your room. Previously, though, we had to use armatures and skeletons and much more complicated setups to produce rooms. Don't need to do that anymore, so this is much easier to do now. Yes, abandon. Start with a chair first, or I mean, even the. I mean, this is why we are providing these files for you. So you'll get this. This is the furniture starter file, and that is a furniture item. Just these 2 objects. That is a furniture item. You can export that from Blender once you've got the file, obviously. But you can export that from Blender and it will produce a furniture item. But that is exactly the same as this. So we've got a node and a mesh, and that is a furniture item, and that's it. That's how simple some of these are. So the complicated bit, or the bit that you'll need to get to grips with, is the meshing, how you make something. And then we have, I think I do have something, I'm not sure, I need to double check. But one of the other tutorials that is being worked on is, so that's the stool that's in some of the pictures that we were just looking at. Yes, Roy, that's exactly it. You just literally, once you've got your root node as your furniture item, as your, well, it's the root node of the furniture item, you just parent the mesh to the root node, and that's it. You're done. So there's no, obviously you have to do the whole vertex group stuff, but beyond that, that's it. As simple as that. You don't have to do anything particularly complicated. But one of the other tutorials, maybe this might be a video, is just getting to grips with making simple furniture from the cube that we were just looking at. So we can use this cube to make things just by duplicating and reshaping this, and we'll be doing some, I'm not sure if that's in the quick starts. Roy, you can do it either way. You can, what I've been finding is that because the node is an object as opposed to a bone within something, which is what your armature would be. You'd have your armature and your bone. So when you parent the two together, you generally have to parent two you've got me off the so armature is normally what you use, and then you'll select the object. But for simple furniture, as long as you've got your vertex group, you don't even need to use an armature object per se, just so long as the two of these are parented together. If you are creating your vertex group first, you can create your vertex group, and then all you need to do is parent the object, parent the mesh as an object, or to the object, which is the node. But if you haven't created a vertex group, so if that's blank, if there's nothing there, then you can choose one of the options to create empty groups, or wait, it'll create the group for you, as you know. So you can do either or. So if you haven't created it, if you have not created a vertex group, you can use one of these options. But if you have used a vertex group, just use object, and it'll work either way. But that's your simple furniture item. But what we're going to be doing is, so you can duplicate this and reshape it. So doing something like that creates a leg from that original object. Or shrinking that down, and you've essentially got a tabletop or a seat top. So all you need to do is duplicate this a couple of times, and you can just simply resize and reposition things. Let's just do something quickly. Oops. That's a one-legged stool. So you don't have to be doing anything particularly complicated, and this is how the tutorials are being written. They're being written so that may look like a complex object to someone that's new to not just IMVU but Blender, but it's not. It's actually just made from, so we've got one leg here, so we just need to move that, duplicate it a couple of times, and voila, you've got a rather uncomfortable stool because the legs are poking out of the top. But that's a furniture item. So that's what we're trying to do with the tutorials, is keep things simple using simple processes so that you get used to how Blender works. And then you can make all sorts of things just from doing things like this, just from copy pasting, duplicating, resizing. You don't need to go into edit mode. We didn't touch edit mode at all there. We just reshaped the objects. And interestingly, with the FBX, we don't necessarily need to do anything else to this. I mean, you could select all of these objects and set up your furniture item as instructed in the tutorials, and that will export as a furniture item. So, keeping things simple. So we've got avatar files, we've got the skeletons, breakdown of the different parts of certain types of skeleton. So nodes, seating. Ooh, weight painting is another good one. That's another one that... so if your mesh doesn't appear, whatever it is, if it doesn't appear in IMVU, it generally means that you haven't got your mesh painting set up properly. And weight painting is just a different way of producing a vertex group. And it's actually this that's the important bit. Weight painting is neither here nor there in terms of getting your product to work. All that is just a way to make a connection between the mesh and the skeleton that produces a vertex group. So we'll go through that. And for furniture, it's usually pretty straightforward. So again, here's another one talking about the difference between a bone, weight painting a bone, versus the furniture, a node, which is what most of these will use. But exactly the same process. Oh, and we do have custom poses. So you'll get that example file. Do I have that to hand? Yeah. So you'll get this as a sample file as well. So you'll be able to see how you create custom poses for furniture. So you might note that a lot of this is to do with furniture and rooms, these tutorials, but that's because the animated stuff for the avatars is more complicated, and those tutorials are to come, but they will be there, they will be available. Yes, that is one of the reasons why there aren't any clothing tutorials yet, Roy, as you might have noticed, which is probably why you asked the question. There aren't any clothing tutorials yet for Blender because those are much more complicated. Because not only do you have to learn how to mesh, you have to learn how to mesh and make sure that your mesh conforms to the avatar. And then once you've done that, you have to make sure that your custom mesh is then weighted to all the bones that are appropriate for the product that you are making. So yeah, so those are much more complicated tutorials to write up, because obviously there's a lot more to do, a lot more to discuss with those. So, but those are coming. There are going to be some clothing tutorials. In fact, I don't have that to hand, unfortunately. But you can download and take a look at, what tutorial was that one from? Avatar Files Explained, I think. But you can look at you can download the sample file, the starter files, and there's the clothing one. There's the one for male and the one for female. So you can play around with those now, but the tutorials are to come on those. We are still writing those up. Just looking through, what else have we got? Well, that's about it, really. I mean, there are some. So we've got static poses. So you'll get some of these as well. That's a yoga pose, apparently. And you'll get the mat to go with that. So that's the mat. And this is covered in some of the tutorials. This is the handles tutorial, actually, this one, because the pose occurs at the same spot regardless as to what the pose actually is. So in order to trigger them, you can move the handles to one side. You don't always have to stand or align up with the seat nodes. So you'll get that as well. And you'll get some poses, custom poses to accompany that. And you'll be able to make things with that as well. All right. Well, I mean, you can drop your link drop the link to your... is the video archived yet? If it is, just drop the link into chat and then people can click on it directly, Roy. That's fine. Well, abandoned, that's why we wrote them all down. That's why we've written these tutorials, is so that you don't have to worry about remembering everything. Yep, so that's about it for now. There will be more files to come, but those will be made available as the tutorials are written up. but you'll be getting all of these. So if there are any questions, ask away, and then we'll call it quits for now. We've done nearly an hour and a half, which is time flies. Yes, which means where it does mean when they get done. Yes. You're very welcome, DJ. So I guess we shall call it quits there for now. I'm not sure what's happening next week. I guess there's going to be an after show stream, but it might be someone else. I don't know yet. But that will be confirmed, I guess, closer to the time. Yes, abandoned. It's best to do. Start with something simple first. Furniture is going to be the simplest, and then move up from there. That is, if you want to make products with Blender, then yes, start with a simple furniture item. The starter file is already available in the Education Center, so you can download and poke around with it. But furniture, simple furniture item is the easiest thing to do. You're very welcome. All right, we're coming up on an hour and a half, so I guess we can call it quits for now. And see you next time, whenever that is. I shall have to have a word with Jinx about that. Right, bye for now, everyone.